Marcus Silvercloud had always found solace by the rushing waters of Canyon Creek. The 62-year-old Apache man made his daily pilgrimage to this secluded spot every morning, just as his grandfather had taught him decades ago. The creek wound through the reservation like a silver ribbon, carrying with it the whispers of ancestors and the promise of new beginnings. Today felt different, though. The autumn air carried an unusual tension, and the normally chattering birds seemed subdued. Marcus adjusted his weathered leather jacket and settled onto his favorite boulder, one that jutted out over the deepest part of the creek. His wife Elena had passed 3 years ago, leaving him with memories that both comforted and haunted him. Their children lived in distant cities now, pursuing careers that the reservation couldn't offer. Marcus understood their choices, but the loneliness still gnawed at him during quiet moments like these. The sound of rushing water had always been therapeutic, but this morning it seemed more urgent, almost frantic. Marcus closed his eyes and let the familiar rhythm wash over him, trying to push away thoughts of the legal battle that had been consuming his life. The state had been trying to seize a portion of reservation land for a new highway project, claiming eminent domain. As one of the tribal council members, Marcus had been fighting the decision for months, but the bureaucratic maze seemed endless. A splash that didn't belong to the natural flow of the creek snapped his attention back to the present. Marcus opened his eyes and scanned the water, thinking perhaps a large branch had fallen in upstream. Then he heard it, a desperate gasping sound that made his blood run cold. About 50 yards downstream, he spotted something that made him leap to his feet. A young woman was struggling in the water, her arms flailing as the current dragged her toward a particularly treacherous section where the creek narrowed and picked up speed. Without hesitation, Marcus kicked off his boots and dove into the frigid water. The shock of the cold nearly took his breath away, but he pushed through it, his powerful strokes cutting through the current. Years of swimming in these waters had made him strong, and despite his age, he moved with surprising agility. The woman had gone under by the time he reached her general location, and panic began to set in as he searched frantically beneath the surface. His lungs burned as he dove deeper, feeling along the rocky bottom with his hands. Just when he thought he might have to surface for air, his fingers brushed against fabric. He grabbed hold and pulled upward with all his strength, breaking the surface with the unconscious woman in his arms. She couldn't have been more than 25, with long blonde hair that now clung to her pale face like seaweed. Marcus struggled to keep both their heads above water as he navigated toward the shore. The current was stronger than usual due to recent rains, and several times he feared they might both be swept away. His shoulders ached and his breathing came in ragged gasps, but he refused to let go. When his feet finally touched solid ground, he half-carried, half-dragged the woman onto the rocky bank. She wasn't breathing. Marcus immediately began CPR, pressing rhythmically on her chest while silently praying to every spirit he could think of. Water poured from her mouth after the fourth compression, and she suddenly convulsed, coughing violently as consciousness returned. Her eyes flew open, a startling shade of green that reminded him of spring grass after rain. "Don't move," Marcus said gently, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder as she tried to sit up. "You nearly drowned. We need to get you warm and check for injuries." The woman's teeth chattered uncontrollably as she looked around in confusion. I can't remember," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the creek's noise. "How did I get here?" Marcus quickly assessed the situation. She was wearing expensive-looking clothes that were now torn and muddy, a designer blazer and skirt that seemed completely inappropriate for hiking near a creek. Her shoes were nowhere to be found, and he noticed what appeared to be bruising on her wrists and neck. Something wasn't right about this scenario. "What's your name?" he asked while removing his jacket and wrapping it around her shivering form. She stared at him blankly for several long moments. I I think it's Amanda, Amanda Wright, but everything else is so foggy." Her hand went to her head, and Marcus noticed a small cut near her hairline that was still bleeding slightly. "Amanda, I'm Marcus Silvercloud. You're on the Apache reservation about 20 miles south of Riverside. Do you remember how you got here?" Amanda shook her head slowly, wincing at the movement. "The last thing I remember clearly is being in my office yesterday afternoon. There was a meeting." She trailed off, looking frustrated and frightened. Marcus helped her stand, noting that she was unsteady on her feet. His truck was parked about a quarter-mile away, and he knew she needed medical attention soon. Hypothermia was a real concern, and the head injury could be serious. As they made their slow progress toward the vehicle, Amanda leaned heavily on his arm. "I work for the Bureau of Indian Affairs," she said suddenly, as if the information had just surfaced from her confused mind. "I'm a federal prosecutor. I was working on a case involving—" She stopped abruptly, pressing her hand to her forehead. "God, why can't I remember?" The mention of the Bureau of Indian Affairs sent a chill through Marcus that had nothing to do with his wet clothes. As they reached his truck, he helped Amanda into the passenger seat and cranked up the heat. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was rescuing someone who worked for the very government agency that was trying to take his people's land. During the drive to the tribal health clinic, Amanda drifted in and out of coherent conversation. Sometimes she would seem almost normal, asking about his life and the reservation. Other times she would stare blankly out the window, clearly struggling with memory gaps. What concerned Marcus most were the moments when she would suddenly tense up, as if remembering something frightening. "They were angry," she said during one of these episodes. "Someone was very angry about the files I found. The corruption goes deeper than anyone realizes. Then she would lapse back into confusion, unable to elaborate on what she meant. Dr. Sarah Running Bear, the clinic's physician, examined Amanda thoroughly while Marcus waited in the lobby. When she emerged an hour later, her expression was serious. She has a mild concussion and definite signs of hypothermia, but she should recover fully. The memory issues are likely temporary, related to the head trauma. However, Marcus, I need to ask you something privately. They stepped outside, where Dr. Running Bear lowered her voice. Those bruises on her neck and wrists are consistent with restraints, and there are injection marks on her arm that suggest she may have been drugged. This woman didn't accidentally fall into that creek. Marcus felt a surge of anger mixed with protective instinct. Someone had tried to kill Amanda, and they had dumped her in the creek hoping it would look like an accident. The question was why, and whether it had anything to do with her work with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. "What do we do now?" he asked. "I'm legally required to report suspected assault to the authorities, but given her job and what she said about corruption, I'm not sure who we can trust. Maybe we should let her recover a bit more before making any decisions." Marcus nodded, but his mind was already working. Something about this situation felt connected to the land dispute his tribe was fighting. Amanda Wright had mentioned finding files, discovering corruption. Could her near-death experience be related to the same forces trying to steal Apache land? When they returned inside, Amanda was sitting up in bed, looking more alert. She had been given dry clothes and a warm meal, and some color had returned to her cheeks. When she saw Marcus, she smiled gratefully. "I remember more now," she said. "I was investigating irregularities in several bureau cases, including one involving land seizures from Native American tribes. I found evidence that officials were taking bribes to fast-track certain projects. I was supposed to meet with my supervisor yesterday afternoon to discuss it, but—" She frowned, concentrating. "He wasn't alone when I got there. There were two other men, and they didn't look like government employees." Marcus and Dr. Running Bear exchanged glances. This was getting more complicated and dangerous by the minute. "Amanda," Marcus said carefully, "one of those cases you were investigating, was it about a highway project through Apache reservation land?" Her eyes widened with recognition. "Yes, how did you know? That was one of the biggest cases. The documentation was all wrong, signatures forged, environmental impact studies falsified. Someone stands to make millions from that highway project, and they don't care who gets hurt in the process." Marcus felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. Amanda Wright wasn't just a random victim. She was the key to stopping the theft of his people's land. But first, they had to keep her alive long enough to expose the truth. The tribal council meeting that evening was unlike any Marcus had attended in his 15 years of service. Word had spread quickly through the reservation about the young federal prosecutor he had pulled from Canyon Creek, and the revelation that she had been investigating corruption related to their land dispute had everyone on edge. The small conference room in the tribal administrative building was packed with council members, elders, and concerned community members who rarely showed up for such gatherings. Marcus sat at the head of the long wooden table, still wearing the same clothes from his morning rescue mission. Amanda Wright sat beside him, looking far better than she had hours earlier but still pale and shaken. Dr. Running Bear had cleared her for the meeting, though she insisted on staying nearby in case Amanda's concussion symptoms worsened. Chief Robert Clearwater, a man whose weathered face told the story of 7 decades of fighting for his people's rights, called the meeting to order. His voice carried the authority of someone who had negotiated with presidents and governors, yet also held the gentle wisdom of a grandfather. "Before we begin," Chief Clearwater said, his dark eyes sweeping the room, "I want everyone to understand the gravity of what we're discussing tonight. What Marcus discovered today may be the break we've been praying for, but it also puts all of us at risk." Amanda shifted nervously in her seat. Despite her professional background, being surrounded by a room full of people whose trust she needed to earn felt overwhelming. The fact that she worked for the same government that had oppressed Native Americans for centuries wasn't lost on anyone present. "Ms. Wright," the chief continued, "we appreciate you being here tonight, especially given what you've been through. But I need to ask directly, can we trust you?" Amanda straightened in her chair, meeting his gaze steadily. "Chief Clearwater, 6 hours ago I was drugged and thrown into a creek to die because I threatened to expose corruption that would steal your land. I think that answers your question." A murmur of approval rippled through the room. Marcus felt a surge of respect for Amanda's directness. She wasn't trying to sugarcoat the situation or make empty promises. "Tell us what you found," said Council Member Janet Strongheart, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who served as the tribe's legal advocate. Amanda pulled out a waterlogged briefcase that had been recovered from the creek along with her. Despite the water damage, most of the documents inside were still readable thanks to protective plastic folders. She spread several papers across the table. "3 months ago, I was assigned to review the Bureau's handling of the Canyon Vista Highway project," Amanda began. "On paper, everything looked legitimate. The state had followed proper procedures for eminent domain, environmental studies had been completed, and all necessary tribal consultations had allegedly taken place." Marcus snorted derisively. "We were never properly consulted. They sent us a form letter and called it consultation." "Exactly," Amanda nodded. That was the first red flag. When I dug deeper, I found that the environmental impact study was conducted by a company owned by State Transportation Director Kevin Morrison's brother-in-law. The study conveniently overlooked the fact that the proposed highway would run directly through your sacred burial grounds. The room erupted in angry voices. Everyone knew about the burial grounds, a site where Apache warriors from the Indian Wars were laid to rest, along with generations of tribal elders. The thought of bulldozing through such sacred land was sacrilegious. Chief Clearwater raised his hand for silence. "What else did you find?" Amanda pulled out another document. Financial records showing that Morrison received payments totaling over $2 million from Pinnacle Construction, the company that was awarded the highway contract. The payments were disguised as consulting fees for Morrison's private engineering firm. $2 million, whispered Elder Mary Crow Feather, shaking her head in disgust. They sold our ancestors' resting place for $2 million. It gets worse, Amanda continued. Pinnacle Construction is owned by a shell company that traces back to a development corporation run by three partners: Morrison, Bureau Regional Director Thomas Hartley, and someone named Vincent Russo, who appears to be connected to organized crime families in Chicago. Marcus felt his anger building as the scope of the conspiracy became clear. This wasn't just bureaucratic incompetence or casual racism. It was a coordinated criminal enterprise using government power to steal Native American land for profit. "How much of this can you prove in court?" asked Janet Strongheart. Amanda's expression grew troubled. "That's where things get complicated. I had compiled enough evidence to bring criminal charges against all three men, but most of my files were destroyed when they ransacked my office yesterday. What I have here is just what I took home to review over the weekend." "What happened yesterday?" Marcus asked. "Can you remember more details now?" Amanda closed her eyes, concentrating. "I had called my supervisor, Director Hartley, to request a meeting. I told him I had discovered serious irregularities in the Canyon Vista project and needed to discuss them urgently. He agreed to meet at 4 p.m. in his office." She paused, rubbing her temples. "When I arrived, Hartley wasn't alone. There were two men with him, large, intimidating guys who definitely weren't government employees. Hartley introduced them as consultants, but one of them had what looked like a gun under his jacket." The room was completely silent now, everyone hanging on her words. "I showed Hartley some of the evidence I had found, thinking he would be as outraged as I was. Instead, he got angry. He said I was stirring up trouble over nothing, that the project was legitimate and important for economic development. When I insisted we had to investigate further, he told me to drop it entirely." Amanda's voice grew shaky as she continued. I said I couldn't do that, that I had taken an oath to uphold justice. That's when one of the consultants stepped forward and suggested I might need some time to reconsider my position. They offered me a drink, coffee, they said, but I started feeling dizzy almost immediately after drinking it. Marcus reached over and placed a supportive hand on her shoulder. He could see how difficult this was for her to relive. The next thing I remember clearly is waking up in the creek with you pulling me out, Amanda finished. Everything in between is just fragments: being in a car, feeling sick, someone carrying me. Chief Clearwater leaned forward intently. Ms. Wright, you understand what this means. They tried to murder you to cover up their crimes, but you're still alive and you still have evidence. The question is, what do we do now? Amanda looked around the room at the faces of people whose land was being stolen, whose sacred sites were being desecrated for profit. These were the same people her government colleagues would dismiss as obstacles to progress or special interests. But sitting here now, seeing their genuine concern and dignity, she felt ashamed of her previous indifference to their struggles. I want to help you stop them, she said firmly. But we have to be smart about it. Hartley has connections throughout the Bureau, and Morrison controls state transportation policy. If we go through normal channels, they'll bury the evidence and probably try to kill me again. What do you suggest? Asked Marcus. Amanda was quiet for a long moment, thinking. We need to get this story to the media, but we need more evidence first. And we need to keep me alive long enough to testify when this goes to trial. You can stay here on the reservation, Chief Clearwater offered. We'll protect you. I appreciate that, but I think I need to go back. If I disappear, they'll know their plan failed. I need to act like I don't remember anything, like the head injury caused amnesia about the meeting. Meanwhile, I can try to recover more evidence from my office and maybe even get them to incriminate themselves. Marcus shook his head vigorously. That's too dangerous. They already tried to kill you once. It's dangerous, Amanda agreed, but it might be our only chance. If I can get them to think they're safe, they might get careless. And if I'm wearing a wire. The implications hung in the air. Amanda was proposing to go undercover against the very people who had tried to murder her, all to help a tribe she had never met until today. It was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, possibly both. Elder Joseph Blackhorse, who had been silent throughout the meeting, finally spoke up. His voice carried the weight of someone who had lived through decades of broken promises and stolen land. Young woman, you don't owe us anything. Your people have taken enough from mine. Why would you risk your life for us? Amanda met his gaze steadily. Because what's happening here is wrong, and I took an oath to fight against exactly this kind of corruption. But more than that, she paused, looking around the room. Today Marcus saved my life when he could have just walked away. Now I want to help save something that matters to all of you. The room was quiet as everyone absorbed her words. Finally, Chief Clearwater spoke. We'll vote on it. All in favor of accepting Ms. Wright's help and supporting her plan. Every hand in the room went up. Part 3. Amanda Wright stared at her reflection in the small mirror above the bathroom sink in Marcus's modest ranch house. The woman looking back at her seemed like a stranger, someone who had made the inexplicable decision to infiltrate a criminal conspiracy that had already tried to kill her once. The bruises on her neck had darkened overnight, and the cut on her forehead was covered with a small bandage that she hoped wouldn't draw too much attention. It had been 2 days since the tribal council meeting, and Amanda had spent the time recovering at Marcus's home while they finalized their plan. The house was simple but comfortable, filled with photos of Marcus's late wife Elena and their 2 children. Amanda found herself drawn to a particular picture on the mantel, Elena laughing at some long-forgotten joke, her eyes sparkling with joy and mischief. "She would have liked you," Marcus said quietly from the doorway, having noticed Amanda studying the photograph. "How can you be sure?" Amanda asked, turning to face him. "Elena always said the measure of a person wasn't where they came from, but what they were willing to sacrifice for what's right. She would have respected what you're doing." Amanda felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. Over the past 2 days, she had gotten to know Marcus better, and she was struck by his quiet strength and unwavering moral compass. He reminded her of her own grandfather, who had been a civil rights lawyer in the 1960s and had taught her that justice was worth fighting for, even when the odds seemed impossible. "Are you ready for this?" Marcus asked, studying her face with concern. Amanda nodded, though truthfully she felt anything but ready. The plan they had developed was risky and relied on several factors going exactly right. She would return to work claiming to have suffered memory loss from her head injury, while secretly wearing a recording device provided by a federal agent Marcus knew from his time serving on intertribal law enforcement committees. The recording device was a small button sewn into her blazer that could capture conversations within a 15-foot radius. Agent Patricia Morales, a FBI investigator who specialized in public corruption cases, had agreed to help after Marcus vouched for Amanda's story. Morales had been investigating rumors of Bureau of Indian Affairs corruption for months, but lacked concrete evidence. "Remember," Marcus said as they prepared to leave for town, "if anything feels wrong, if you sense they suspect you, get out immediately. The evidence isn't worth your life." Amanda squeezed his hand gratefully. "I'll be careful. And Marcus, thank you for everything. I know this isn't easy for you, trusting someone from the government that's been trying to steal your land." Marcus was quiet for a moment. My grandfather used to say that the Creator sometimes sends help from unexpected places. Maybe that's what you are. The drive back to Riverside took 45 minutes, giving Amanda time to mentally prepare for what lay ahead. She had called in sick for the past 2 days, citing her head injury, which gave her story credibility. Her supervisor had been surprisingly understanding, even sending flowers to her apartment with a note expressing concern for her recovery. Amanda's downtown office building looked exactly the same as always, but now she viewed it through different eyes. How many of her colleagues were involved in the corruption? How many were simply turning a blind eye to activities they suspected but didn't want to confront? As she rode the elevator to the 12th floor, Amanda tried to project the demeanor of someone still recovering from a traumatic injury. "Amanda, thank goodness you're all right," said her secretary, Bate, rushing over as soon as Amanda entered the office suite. "We were so worried when you didn't come in Monday. Director Hartley said you had a terrible accident." "I'm still a bit fuzzy on the details," Amanda replied carefully. "The doctors said I have a mild concussion. I remember being in a meeting Friday afternoon, but everything after that is pretty much blank until I woke up in the hospital." Bates' expression was sympathetic. "How awful. Director Hartley will want to see you as soon as you're settled in. He's been asking about you every day." Amanda felt her pulse quicken but kept her expression neutral. "Of course. Let me just check my messages first." Her office had been cleaned and organized in her absence, which struck her as unusual. Normally, paperwork would pile up for days when she was out. A closer inspection revealed that several files were missing from her desk, including her personal notes on various cases she had been reviewing. 20 minutes later, Amanda knocked on Director Thomas Hartley's door. He was a heavy-set man in his mid-50s with thinning gray hair and small, calculating eyes that always seemed to be evaluating potential threats. Today, he greeted her with what appeared to be genuine concern. "Amanda, how are you feeling? Please sit down," Hartley said, gesturing to the chair across from his massive oak desk. "I was so sorry to hear about your accident. What exactly happened?" "That's just it. I can't really remember," Amanda said, touching the bandage on her forehead. "The doctor said memory loss is common with concussions. I remember our meeting Friday afternoon, discussing the Canyon Vista Highway case, but then everything goes blank until I woke up in the emergency room." Hartley leaned back in his chair, and Amanda thought she detected a flicker of relief in his eyes. "Well, the important thing is that you're recovering. Don't worry about the work. We've redistributed your caseload temporarily so you can focus on getting better." "Actually, I feel ready to get back to work," Amanda said. "Maybe reviewing my cases will help jog my memory. Could I get my files back on the Canyon Vista project? I'd like to refresh myself on where we left off. For just a moment, Hartley's friendly mask slipped, and Amanda saw something cold and dangerous in his expression. Then he smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm afraid that won't be necessary. While you were recovering, we completed our review of the Canyon Vista case. Everything was found to be in order, and we've approved the project to move forward. There's no need for you to spend any more time on it." Amanda felt anger rising in her chest but forced herself to appear confused rather than confrontational. "Oh, I thought I had found some irregularities that needed further investigation." "No, no," Hartley said quickly. "That was just a misunderstanding. You were being overly cautious, which is admirable, but sometimes in this job we have to trust that our colleagues in other agencies know what they're doing." The recording device hidden in Amanda's blazer was capturing every word, but she needed Hartley to be more specific about the crimes they were committing. She decided to push a little harder while still maintaining her confused persona. "I'm sorry, but I'm having trouble remembering the details. Could you remind me what specific concerns I had raised? Maybe if I understand what I was thinking, it will help me remember the meeting." Hartley's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Amanda, I think you should take more time to recover. Head injuries can be serious, and you shouldn't push yourself too hard too soon." "But I feel fine," Amanda insisted. "And I'm curious about this case now. Could I at least see the environmental impact study? I thought there were issues with the burial ground survey." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Hartley stood up abruptly, his friendly demeanor completely gone now. "Ms. Wright, I'm going to be very clear with you. The Canyon Vista Highway project is a done deal. It has been approved at every level of government and will provide significant economic benefits to the region. Your job is to support legitimate government initiatives, not to create problems where none exist." Amanda blinked innocently. "Of course, Director. I wasn't trying to create problems. I just want to make sure I understand my work." Hartley stared at her for a long moment, clearly trying to determine whether she was being genuine or playing games. Finally, he sat back down and forced another smile. "You know what? Why don't you take the rest of the week off? Get completely recovered and we'll start fresh next Monday. I'll have Bate clear your schedule." Amanda knew she was being dismissed, but she had gotten what she came for. Hartley's aggressive reaction to her questions about the Canyon Vista project, combined with his obvious relief that she couldn't remember their Friday meeting, would be compelling evidence on the recording. "Thank you, Director. That's very considerate," Amanda said, standing to leave. "Oh, one more thing. I feel terrible that I can't remember our meeting Friday. Were there other people there? I have this vague recollection of additional voices." Hartley's face went completely pale. "No," he said quickly. "It was just you and me. You must be confusing it with another meeting." Amanda nodded and headed for the door, but Hartley's voice stopped her. "Amanda, I hope you understand how dangerous it can be when federal employees go beyond their authority and interfere with legitimate government business. Sometimes people who do that find themselves facing serious consequences, career-ending consequences, or worse." The threat was clear, and Amanda felt a chill run down her spine. But she had what she needed, and more importantly, she was still alive to use it. "Of course, Director, I would never want to interfere with anything important." As Amanda left the building, she could feel Hartley's eyes watching her from his 12th floor window. She had successfully planted the seeds of doubt about her memory while gathering evidence of his involvement in the conspiracy. But she also knew that she had probably just signed her own death warrant. Part 4. Marcus paced nervously in the small conference room at the FBI field office, checking his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. Amanda had been inside the federal building for over 2 hours, and each passing minute increased his anxiety. Agent Patricia Morales sat across from him, monitoring the recording equipment that was capturing Amanda's conversations in real time. "She's doing well," Agent Morales said, adjusting her headphones. "Hartley is definitely taking the bait. He's getting more agitated with each question she asks." Marcus had met Patricia Morales 6 months earlier during a joint investigation into missing persons cases on various reservations. She was a small, intense woman with fierce dark eyes and a reputation for taking down corrupt officials who preyed on vulnerable communities. When Marcus had called her about Amanda's situation, she had immediately agreed to help. "Is she safe?" Marcus asked, unable to hide his concern. "For now," Patricia replied, "but Hartley just threatened her pretty directly. We got it all on tape." Through the headphones, Marcus could hear Amanda's voice as she wrapped up her conversation with Hartley and prepared to leave his office. Her tone was perfectly innocent, but Marcus could detect the underlying tension. When the audio cut out as she left the building, he felt his shoulders relax slightly. "She did great," Patricia said, removing her headphones. "We've got Hartley on tape admitting the project was fast-tracked and threatening a federal prosecutor for asking questions about it. Combined with the financial evidence Amanda recovered, we can probably get warrants to search both Hartley's and Morrison's offices." Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message from Amanda. "Coming out now. Everything went according to plan." 15 minutes later, Amanda entered the conference room looking pale but determined. She immediately began removing the recording device from her blazer, while updating them on everything that had happened during her meeting with Hartley. "He was definitely relieved that I couldn't remember Friday's meeting," Amanda said. And he got visibly angry when I asked about the environmental impact study and burial grounds. But the most telling moment was when I asked if other people had been in the meeting. He went completely white and lied about it being just the two of us. Patricia nodded approvingly. That's perfect. His reaction to your questions about things a legitimate director would want investigated shows consciousness of guilt. Combined with the threat he made at the end, we have strong evidence of his involvement. What's our next step? Marcus asked. Patricia pulled out a thick file folder. We move fast. Hartley is definitely suspicious now, and if he contacts Morrison or their organized crime associates, they might try to destroy evidence or worse. I'm going to request emergency warrants tonight to search Hartley's office, Morrison's office, and Pinnacle Construction's records. Amanda frowned thoughtfully. There's something else we should consider. When I was in Hartley's office, I noticed he had a framed photo on his desk of himself with some other men at what looked like a construction site. One of them might have been Morrison, but I couldn't be sure from the angle. Did you recognize any of the others? Patricia asked. No, but one of them looked like he could have been one of the men who was in Hartley's office Friday. Large build, expensive suit, definitely not a government employee. Marcus felt a surge of anger thinking about the men who had drugged Amanda and tried to kill her. When do we arrest them? We need to be strategic about this, Patricia cautioned. If we move too fast, we might miss the bigger players. Corruption cases like this often involve networks of people, and we want to get everyone, not just the obvious targets. Amanda was quiet for a moment, then looked up with a troubled expression. There's something else. When I was leaving the building, I noticed a black SUV parked across the street that hadn't been there when I arrived. It might be nothing, but given everything that's happened. Patricia immediately stood up and walked to the window. After scanning the street below, she turned back with a grim expression. There's a black SUV parked outside this building too. Different license plate, but similar model. Marcus felt his protective instincts kick in. They're watching her. Or all of us, Patricia said. Amanda, I think you need to disappear for a while. If they suspect you remember more than you're letting on, they'll try again. Amanda shook her head firmly. No, if I disappear now, they'll know something is wrong. I need to go back to my apartment and act normal while you execute those search warrants. That's too dangerous, Marcus protested. They've already tried to kill you once. But I'm more valuable to them alive right now, Amanda argued. As long as they think I have amnesia about Friday's meeting, they'll want to keep me around to monitor what I remember. It's when they realize I've been lying that I'll be in real danger. Patricia looked torn. She has a point, but the risk is enormous. Amanda pulled out her phone and showed them a text message she had received while in Hartley's office. It was from an unknown number and simply read, "Hope you're feeling better. Would love to catch up soon. A friend." "This came while I was in the meeting," Amanda said. "I think it's from whoever tried to kill me Friday. They're testing to see if I remember them." Marcus stared at the message, feeling sick. "What did you respond?" "Nothing yet. I wasn't sure how to play it." Patricia thought for a moment. "Respond that you're still confused about a lot of things but you're recovering. Keep it vague but friendly. We need to buy time for the search warrants." As Amanda typed her response, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. These people had already shown they were willing to commit murder to protect their scheme, and now they were putting Amanda directly back in their crosshairs. "I want to stay close to her," Marcus said. "If something goes wrong, she'll need backup." Patricia nodded. "We can set up surveillance near her apartment building. But Marcus, if this goes bad, you need to get her out of there immediately. Don't try to be a hero." Amanda finished typing her message and hit send. Within minutes, her phone buzzed with a response. "Great. Let's meet for coffee tomorrow morning. I'll pick you up at 9 a.m. The room fell silent as the implication sank in. Whoever had tried to kill Amanda was now asking to meet with her, presumably to find out what she remembered. It was either the perfect opportunity to gather more evidence, or it was walking straight into an execution. "We wire you up again," Patricia said finally. "Full surveillance team, multiple backup units. If anything feels wrong, you abort immediately." Amanda looked at Marcus, who was clearly struggling with the decision. She reached over and took his hand. "I know this is dangerous, but it might be our only chance to identify the other people involved in this conspiracy. If we can get them to talk about Friday's meeting, we'll have everything we need to bring them all down." Marcus squeezed her hand gently. "Promise me you'll be careful. Your grandfather's fight for justice wouldn't have meant much if he had gotten himself killed in the process." Amanda smiled at the reference to the grandfather she had told him about. "I promise. But Marcus, if something does happen to me, make sure this story gets told. Make sure your people's land is protected." As they finalized plans for the next day's dangerous operation, Marcus couldn't help but think about the strange twists of fate that had brought them together. 3 days ago, he had been a lonely widower taking his morning walk by the creek. Now he was part of a federal investigation that could save his tribe's sacred land, while bringing down a criminal conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government. But as he looked at Amanda's determined face, Marcus also couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to lose the brave young woman who had become so important to all of them in such a short time. Part 5. Amanda Wright barely slept that night. Every small sound in her apartment building Footsteps in the hallway, a door,